Okay, hello. Hello. Apologies for anyone who has been here for a little while. Sorry, I completely confused myself over the start time. I thought I was starting at 1:30, so thank you. I'm glad that there are some people here. Okay, my name is Alice LeMay. I'm a bespoke designer based in Glasgow, and I'm here today to talk about a project called Clò An Tìr. So that's how you pronounce that, Scottish Gaelic for cloth of the land. And yeah, I'm here to talk about the project that I've been working on this year, and I guess just tell you a little bit about my practice as a bespoke designer. So I live and work in Glasgow. I have done for the past 9 years. But previously I was living in London, and I'm actually a UAL graduate, so I studied at London College of Fashion. And when I was at London College of Fashion, I guess one thing that wasn't really presented to me was the possibility of working in a small way. It wasn't really advocated for as something that would be seen as being successful. So either we were sort of pushed towards going and trying to work for a big brand and getting a small job at a big brand and trying to work your way up, or, what everyone really wanted was to become an overnight success at Fashion Week and very quickly, have factories producing their clothing and become this, big fashion name. And I wasn't really very enchanted by either of those options. So I was thinking of how I might go forward into an industry that I was becoming increasingly aware was not necessarily the most considerate industry for both people and planet. And that those thought processes were really, I guess, amplified by the Rana Plaza factory collapse in 2013. So I was at London College of Fashion at that time. And yeah, just like I think a lot of us, horrified. And I felt very guilty that I was sort of tacitly part of this industry or becoming part of this industry. And I really wanted to find an alternative way of working creatively, making clothes that I loved, but without pursuing something that I knew was just completely ethically compromised. So a sort of long meandering journey that I won't bore you with the details of found me setting up my own bespoke studio in Glasgow, where I've been, as I say, for the past 8-9 years, making clothes for clients. Generally, I'm making bespoke tailored clothes, so that's sort of suits and coats, but I also occasionally make, I guess, slightly more unusual wedding dresses and evening wear as well. And I just wanted to share this quote with you, which I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with, from Dilys Williams. But I think I just wanted to share it because, again, going back to what I mentioned just a moment ago, I didn't feel that there were that many ways to exist in the fashion industry as a recent graduate. I knew that there were, boundless ways of expressing my creativity, but it didn't seem to me that there were that many pathways for operating sustainably and ethically in the fashion industry. And I just wanted to share that quote because I feel that, I guess, that for me, what I feel I have created for myself does kind of challenge the status quo. Partly in the fact that I've not pursued a career in the mainstream fashion industry, but also even in the bespoke, the world of bespoke, what I do is quite different. But it's what fits for me, and it's what I feel passionate about. And anyone who's run their own business knows that it takes a lot of effort and energy. And if you're doing something you don't believe in, you're not going to last very long. So one book that was really, really, I guess, pivotal to me in how I'm thinking about materials now is Cradle to Cradle, remaking how we make things. Remaking the way we make things. And I would thoroughly recommend any students watching this to read this book. You might find after reading it, if it's had the impact on you that it had on me, that you find your choices are much more limited. But I am a firm believer that like limiting your material choices doesn't necessarily mean that it limits your creativity. In fact, quite the opposite. I think working with boundless material options can often be quite daunting and dizzying, and I personally work best when I'm under a little bit more of a restricted palette in terms of the materials I can work with. So yeah, I really, really recommend this book. So bringing it a bit more up to date, the project that I've been working on this year, Clò An Tìr, which is, as I say, Scottish Gaelic for cloth of the land. I just wanted to explain a little bit about why why me as an English person, I'm using a Gaelic phrase for this project. So the area where I live and work was formerly known as Camlachie. And it's actually also the area where the weaver on the project works and the natural dyer on the project works as well. So the three of us sort of heritage craftspeople, we all work within about 200 yards of each other in an area of Glasgow called Bridgeton. But it was formerly called Camlachie, and it was a weaving village. And it has its roots in the Gaelic Camlachie, which I've probably just totally murdered, which roughly translates as winding dark water, which that just really appealed to me. It's quite poetic, because there's a river that runs through Camlachie called the Camlachie Burn. So it felt appropriate to honour the Gaelic heritage of the place I was working in and drawing inspiration from and give the project a Gaelic name. And this was, I guess, it felt like the right choice when I then later found out about the Gaelic concept of duchas, which is similar to cradle, but I suppose a little bit more spiritual, for want of a better word. So it's explained here much better than I could kind of explain it off the top of my head. Duchas is a millennia-old Gaelic concept derived from the word duch, meaning earth or land. Duchas stresses the interconnectedness of people, land, culture, and an ecological balance among all entities, human and more than human. Duchas goes beyond a mere feeling of identification with place and community to tangible conduct and action motivated by a sense of ethics, respect, and responsibility for said place and community to maintain ecological balance. So I think that whilst, throughout this 2-day event, people haven't necessarily been using this Gaelic word to describe what they're passionate about, I think it does actually fall in line with what a lot of the exhibitors here and the different brands working here are passionate about, which is trying to find a more ecologically responsible way of working. And not because you sort of think you should because somebody's watching you and you want to tick some box, but because you understand that you have a real link with the place that you're working, and it's the right thing to do without wanting to, make a moral judgment. So I really like this concept, and I guess I feel like it's really informed how I've been working on the project. So this is one of the pieces from the collection. It's made with British wool. British wool is the kind of the spine of the collection. It's in pretty much every single piece. And in this case, it's the main cloth of this coat, which was woven by a micro mill called Vevar, which, as I say, is just around the corner from my studio. And I also wanted to share just a little thing about the pocket bags. So every single piece of every garment in this collection is biodegradable. But more than that, I really wanted to source everything within the UK. I wanted to challenge myself to see if it was possible to create a collection of luxury clothing. So clothing that looks and feels luxurious, well-crafted, aspirational, for want of a better word, but limiting myself to sourcing within the UK. Now, of course, we don't grow cotton here. We don't really grow linen here, although there are some beginnings, again, starting. There are people growing linen. So what I decided to do was work with vintage material. So that sort of became the governing philosophy. What is here? What can be grown here? British wool. And a little bit of English linen, which I'll get onto in the next slide. But what's already here? What can we work with? So we can work with, we have a huge stock of vintage fabric, clothing, thread, and all of these items can be used and utilized, and it doesn't, for me, I don't feel that denigrates the work or makes it less luxurious. Quite the opposite. For me, it gives each piece more of a story. And for me as a designer, it's so much more enjoyable because I'm not kind of wringing my hands and thinking, oh, a whole new tree has been chopped down to create this viscose. I'm making connections with vintage sellers and making connections with mills who are, working with British wool. And it's really rewarding and energizing. So I thoroughly recommend it. Although it does come with challenges, like there are certain things that are difficult to source responsibly using those limitations. But yeah, so these pocket bags were made from a really beautiful linen tablecloth, which I sourced just around the corner from me in an antiques yard. And the woman who sold it to me, she sold me a lot of linen for the project that was used to stabilize certain aspects of the garments. And that it just feels nice. When I go to that market, I'll chat to that woman. I've created a bond and a relationship there. And again, I think that's something that we've talked, different people over the course of the last sort of 48 hours have talked a lot about. It's forming those connections, creating that sense of community. So yeah, very briefly to talk about English linen. Anybody who's quite interested in sort of regenerative agriculture or regenerative textiles may be aware of a sort of a blossoming resurgence of interest in growing linen in the UK. And whilst it's not at kind of commercial scale, there are people who are growing small amounts of flax to create linen. So I was really fortunate that one of the earlier companies who are growing Flaxland, provided me with English linen that was grown and spun in Somerset, and I was able to use it for the gimp in the buttonholes. So that's the sort of quite wiry thread that goes inside a buttonhole to give it real kind of oomph and strength. And I was also able to use a small amount for the collar on the coat as well. So again, it sounds a little woo-woo or wishy-washy, but it just feels nice to know that the collar of that coat, inside the collar of that coat, there is a piece of linen that a couple of years ago was growing in a field. Likewise, all the cloth of the coat, a few years ago was walking around a field. And it just feels nicer. And as I say earlier, it's energizing. It makes me feel more connected both to what I'm doing, but also to where I live, be that Glasgow or more broadly the UK. So just a little bit more on the coat, which is hanging up on display a bit further down the street. The buttons on the coat, I got a little bit indulgent on the coat, I have to say. The buttons on the coat were lathed from antique oak. So my partner's stepfather is a very talented joiner, and he has a lathe, and he lathed these buttons, and then we ebonized them with vinegar and iron. And then the lining for the coat was dyed. It's vintage kimono silk that was dyed with British-grown indigo. So yeah, really passionate to show the possibilities of natural dye with tailoring. So yeah, a really important partner for this project was Marling & Evans. So they have quite a few pieces on display as part of the exhibition. They're a mill based in Huddersfield, and they make beautiful, beautiful cloth. And Mark Garrett is particularly passionate about the undyed British wool that they produce. So it's both woolen and worsted. So that's what I suppose makes them quite unusual, is that they produce worsted suiting cloth. And I really wanted to show the possibility of British undyed suiting. Because some of my clients are businessmen and women. They want suits that they can wear in a professional context that look polished. And I was delighted to discover that this fabric existed to deliver both my environmental desires, but also that they would feel the business in these clothes. So this is one of the worsted suits, well, the jacket from one of the worsted suits that we've created for the project. And I just wanted to throw in a little image here of this fantastic wool structure as we're sitting in a wool structure today. This was created by the artist Steve Messam. It's called Tower, and it was on Penistone Hill outside Haworth, near Bradford, part of the Bradford City of Culture celebrations. And we traveled there, myself and my apprentice traveled there to do a kind of impromptu photo shoot at an earlier stage of the project. So that was all part of a kind of Yorkshire field trip that we did, where we also visited Marling and Evans. I wanted to talk a little bit about colour and local colour. So I was wearing this bright red suit yesterday, feeling a little bit out of place. It's not my usual colour. But yeah, so this suit, again, is British worsted. And the cloth was grown and woven in the UK, and then dyed by my studio neighbour, Julia Billings, who's a natural dyer, using madder root, which was grown on the Isle of Wight. So not that close to Glasgow, but it turns out madder root takes about 4 years to develop the colour in the root to be able to use it as a dye stuff. So yeah, it would have been nice to grow some madder for the project, but that's a bit more of a long-term aspiration. And I just wanted to show the various colours that can be achieved by modifying the dye with chalk. And then, yeah, you can see sort of a bit more the inside of the jacket, all the hand stitching that goes into a bespoke jacket. And obviously it looks a lot more polished here on the model. So again, we were working with local shoot locations, so we didn't want to travel outside of Glasgow. We happened to find this fantastic building called the Mercat Building, which was formerly a warehouse, which I'm sure in its past life would have stored bales of wool. So it's undergoing a big renovation at the moment, and we were able to get in there and use it as a location for these images. Another image of the men's worsted suit. I've stolen an image from livestockconservancy.org here, because I didn't have a picture of a sheep myself, but this is I'm going to get this in the wrong order, the Black Welsh Mountain, or Welsh Black Mountain fleece that's been used to create this beautiful undyed brown. So I really wanted to show with this collection the colour that can be achieved both from natural dyes derived from plants grown in the UK, but also just the natural colour of the sheep's fleece itself. And here again it is looking quite a lot more polished on our model for the shoot. I just wanted to kind of finish up by talking about other ways that British wool can be used. The most obvious way for me, or the thing I was really passionate about, was showing how it can be suiting, and like quite luxurious suiting that has a story as well. But I've used it in other parts of the project. So this bustier, which is made of Duchess silk satin, just offcuts that I had in my studio, which have then been dyed naturally with birch leaves and weld and goldenrod by Julia, all gathered in Glasgow. It's just magic. I could talk about natural dyes, not really knowing what I'm talking about. I could talk about natural dyes all day, because it's just been fascinating to observe her practice over the project. So yeah, it's a really vibrant yellow, but inside the bustier, it's padded with cloud wool, which is a British wool non-woven wadding. They're a company that I just wanted to show you the full outfit. So that really gave that bustier a little bit more structure. And we also used cloud wool for all the shoulder pads. So it was really useful, really, really useful. And again, undyed. So I haven't really made shoulder pads before for when I'm making clients their suits. I usually just buy them in, but they are quite easy to make, and it's just, again, that other layer of knowing that every single part of the thing that you're handing over, you know exactly what's in it, where it's come from, and I can say to the client with full confidence that, you know, you could bury this suit. Obviously, they're unlikely to. You hope that they'll have a long, long life, you know, use with it. But you can say you could bury this suit in your garden and grow vegetables on it and not have any worries about, you know, any toxic chemicals leaching into the soil or microplastics. So that sort of, again, is another thought that's constantly in the back of my mind with this project. What happens if we bury it? Now, I'm not going to be burying them anytime soon, but it's, I guess, again, it's, I think, acknowledging that every choice we make has a legacy. And in the world of fashion, you know, where things are very fast-paced, I think it can be difficult to remember that, because it's like on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. But yeah, there's, you know, polyester clothing. Who knows how long it will be in our environment for? So I've really wanted to keep that as a focus. Lastly, I just wanted to include a slightly unusual application of British wool. I occasionally make wedding dresses, and we had a cloth woven specially for us by Marling & Evans, a cream Jacob undyed wool, worsted. And it was really lovely and lightweight and crisp and smooth, and it's got a lovely kind of natural sheen to it. It drapes beautifully. And I feel like for the eco-conscious bride, it could be a really nice option. It's not going to be for everyone. It's not bright white. It hasn't been bleached. And, you know, it's not even a pale ivory or even a mid-ivory. It's definitely cream. It's similar color to the walls around us. But I think it's gorgeous. And it made this beautiful skirt, which with other pieces, you know, makes a lovely sort of bridal ensemble. Yeah, and I think so many brides in the UK, perhaps unknowingly, are wearing plastic down the aisle, which is I've always thought is a bit depressing, particularly if you're paying thousands of pounds to wear a plastic dress, and you're going to wear it once, and then it's going to go, you know, into landfill. So I really wanted to show a bridal possibility for British wool. And all the pieces from the collection are going to be displayed in Glasgow next weekend, which is quite terrifying. But yeah, we're pretty much there. I don't expect any of you or many of you will be in Glasgow next weekend. I will be. But yeah, we're having a short exhibition at Trades Hall in the city centre of Glasgow, and then hoping to take it further afield, because there's loads of material bits and pieces that, you know, I haven't even scratched the surface with this talk, all the bits and pieces, all the considerations that have been made in the project. Lots of stories and different craftspeople that we've worked with to really ensure that every single part of the collection has that material integrity. Yeah, and thank you. So, yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I can pass you this. Bernie, I can just pass you this.
Okay. I don't know how we turn them on. Where do we go? Oh, guys, this is working. Yeah, okay. Have we got any questions? Yes. Harriet.
Thank you for your talk. It was really interesting. I wanted to know more about the British-grown indigo and what that was like and where you sourced that from. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, actually, initially we wanted to grow our own woad for the project, and I did grow woad in my garden, much to my partner's horror, because he had plans for the garden this year, but I just took it over with woad. But we weren't able to grow enough to dye the lining for the coat. So then we were sort of thinking, oh, how are we going to produce that lovely blue that we had in mind? And we discovered Ballywick blue, which they're on the Isle of Wight. And so she provided both the madder root and the indigo for the project. And Julia was kind of amazed, particularly the madder root. I think it was had an incredibly incredibly dense yield, so she was able to use perhaps less than she would normally work with when importing from other countries, and it got created these really vivid reds and oranges. So yeah, Ballywick Blue was an absolute find, so definitely recommend them.
Any more questions from anyone? No. I mean, I just want to quickly ask, thank you so much, that was amazing. Oh, we have got a question. You do yours first. Go on. No, we would like it to be on the record.
Oh, okay. I have a quick question about when you're sourcing like vintage and like repurposing things like that. How do you go about that? Is that like an in-person like practice that you have to go and like, and how does that influence kind of your practice as well? Like of those like kind of sourcing trips? Yeah, what's that kind of like?
Thanks. I mean, sourcing vintage things is like one of my favorite things to do. So it didn't feel like a chore ever. But most of the vintage things I was sourcing, I was doing online. So looking on eBay, looking on Etsy. I did discover that actually another bespoke tailor, who's very, very, very skilled. He also does dressmaking. His name's Thomas von Nordheim, and he's got some great books. Great craftsperson. Anyway, he also has an enormous stock of vintage silk threads in all sorts of colors. And I was able to actually send him swatches of fabrics from the collection, and he could color match them for me. I wasn't expecting that at all. And it was a while before we got to that point. So that there's a lot of threads in my studio that are not the right color, that I've kind of looked at online and ordered, hoping that they would turn out to be perfect. And many of them weren't, but I'll use them for other things. They're not going anywhere. But then, so like a lot of the linen I sourced from this woman in the Barras, which is a very famous market in Glasgow, lots of antique sellers. And then, just making connections with different vintage sellers in the UK, mostly through, Etsy and eBay. But one really rich source of vintage fabric was that I found was vintage kimonos, which are obviously not originally produced in the UK, but I found that it was quite a rich seam of really well preserved fabric. So a lot of time when you're buying vintage fabric, you can worry about stains, excuse me, or potentially the fabric being deteriorated in some way. But I was able to identify quite a few vintage sellers who were unpicking kimonos and selling the fabric. And it seemed actually that kimono lining was a really fantastic material to identify, because nobody was really buying it. So I worked with this vintage seller who sells a lot of kimono fabric, jazzy colors, and people would buy them for patchworks projects and all that. But she had stacks and stacks of plain cream, undyed silk that she wasn't able to really sell. So I've been buying loads of that from her. So that's really nice, because it's sort of a mutually beneficial. I get it for a good price. She's able to sell it. And then she also feels part of the collection as well. So hope that answers your question.
We got any more? Okay. I'd just again like to say thank you very much. That was incredibly informative and insightful into everything you do within your immediate team, and then the other people that you work with around Glasgow and more broadly, I guess, around the UK. We spoke earlier on one of the other talks about these kind of new ecosystems and a lot more people working together, as in the makers, the manufacturers, the designers, the cloth makers, the yarn spinners, the natural dyers. And it's great for me, because I've always been around decentralising of fashion and not having this whole thing about fashion being in London, which at the moment is not sustainable financially. And we know that our textile industry has always been pan-UK. So it's great to have you here. Thanks so much. And I think our students, when they listen to this, will really appreciate it too. Because many of our students might come to London to study, but I think they want to go back to their various different either countries or pan-UK. But getting back to my question is, do you think these kind of new collectives and new systems are starting up around Glasgow, and people are starting to work together? So rather than that kind of old model that you talked about at college, which, you know, we still have students that feel, hopefully we don't have academics that teach in that way, but what are those new systems, and how can we get students to work together like this and network and meet? Do you think that's happening? I think we heard this morning from another speaker that it is, and they're setting up something in North Yorkshire. But how, and I don't know if you know Cavan, who's got a fantastic dye space in Glasgow. I think must be quite near. And I know she works a lot with a lot of designers and makers. So basically, how that's working for you and your collectives, and do you see there has been a shift and a change in the narrative that you thought you weren't gaining from your education?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about Glasgow, or I guess many cities throughout the UK, is that it's affordable to have. It's more affordable to have a studio. So, whilst I studied at London College of Fashion, I was living in Tottenham with my brother and sister, and thinking about making a career in bespoke. Kind of by accident, but I guess now I've realised it's the perfect way for me to make clothes. But yeah, the idea of renting my own studio space in London, it wasn't viable. I got a studio space through. I was working with a makerspace called Building Blocks, and we sort of set up a fashion and textile makerspace. And because I was running it, I had a space kind of as part of that. So it's sort of a free space, but that's kind of unheard of. There aren't many schemes like that. So I think Glasgow, I can only kind of speak to that city in particular. I think it just is a lot more affordable to be able to get a studio space or even have a small shop. I think, a lot of people, if you're starting something in London, the idea of having a retail space that is yours with your name above the door just seems like, 20 years, if it ever happens. Whereas in Glasgow, that is more possible, and there are schemes like there's a scheme at the moment with Glasgow City Council where they're trying to re-energise vacant spaces. There's lots of vacant spaces in the city centre that are just sitting there looking quite depressing. So designers and artists are taking advantage of that. And I think also it's a slightly different thing, perhaps when you have a smaller community and everybody knows each other. There is more of a kind of fellow feeling and wanting to help each other out. And because there's so few of us, collaboration, I think, is kind of more inevitable because you're not, because you know this person and they're kind of in the back of your mind. You think, oh, actually, yeah, no, I could ask so-and-so to do my buttonholes, or, oh, they're actually quite a good pattern cutter, so I could go and see them. So I think it's sort of just, the smallness of the community it makes it more intimate, and you're more likely to sort of to reach out to those people. And I think there's less of a feeling of competition and sort of wanting to protect your ideas and not have anyone come into your studio space, and the sort of rivalry, because I guess in Glasgow, I feel like there's quite a lot of independent clothes makers. Not as many as there have been historically, but I'm seeing more and more kind of join the community. But they all have their own sort of different audience. So no one's like in direct competition for exactly the same clients. But I'm always saying, I'm actually currently Glasgow's only bespoke tailor, but I would love for there to be more. And I'm currently training an apprentice. And I would love for her to start her own business. She's terrified of it because she sees how difficult it is. So, and she's not sure that she's quite ready yet, which is fair enough. I think you have to start when you're ready. But I would love for there to be more of a community in the city, and I think there is. I think it is growing. Yeah.
One more, yeah. I could talk forever, but we will.
Hello. We spoke a little bit about it yesterday, but it's really interesting. So as a bespoke tailor, you, off your own back, you've made a decision on the material type there. I was just wondering how, if the client are also open to a bit of guidance on the fabric choice, because for us it's a British wool. We're competing with the massive swatch books of lots of the going on feel and softness, rather than that deeper level of understanding on where that fabric's come from. So do you think in kind of merging your bespoke practice with your own passion, do you see a future for the business where the customer is receptive to being guided on fabric choice?
Thanks, Louisa. Yeah, I think so. Whilst this has been very much like a project, and it was funded by Creative Scotland as a kind of research and development project, and there are certain aspects of it that aren't viable, like the handmade buttons. I'm not going to be offering that to clients unless they're incredibly wealthy and they want to pay Pete to make buttons. But yeah, so certain aspects of it haven't worked. Certain aspects of it just were never going to be viable, but are nice things that I wanted to do, like the buttons. But other aspects have really worked, and the suits, I think, kind of speak for themselves. I think they work, and particularly the undyed range that already exists. There's so little kind of complication for that. There's not. When you're working with natural dyes, quite often you have to work seasonally, and that can be quite limiting, particularly if a client's in a rush for something. But what I'm wanting this to become isn't just a kind of standalone project that I did one year. I want this to become the start of a business that attracts the kind of client who really prioritizes provenance, story, local materials over some perception of luxury, which has been so skewed through sort of 60, 70 years of marketing. So now when I am starting, I haven't really been seeing clients this year while I've been working on the project, but I am starting to welcome clients into the studio now. And without wanting to be too overbearing, I am presenting British wool to them as the first thing I show them. With the caveat, because I have all the bunch books of, beautiful, drapey, soft merino wool. But for me, I suppose I've been completely brainwashed, and they're just so much less interesting. And I guess also, like, a lot of my clients, because bespoke tailoring isn't so much of a thing in Glasgow. It's not like Savile Row where there's a whole street and people are attracted to it as a status symbol and buying multiple suits. Most of the clients who come to me perhaps are only going to buy one bespoke suit, and it's a real investment. So the characteristics of British wool are really helpful to me in that context, because I can say, look, this is perhaps not the smoothest, most luxurious, silkiest wool on the planet, but it will last. It will last and last. It's really, really robust. And you can feel that. It's not hard to imagine how a super 180, will quickly, or more quickly, degrade than some of the cloths I'm presenting to them. So I'm both trying to kind of gently introduce it into my existing bespoke practice, but also looking forward to the future. I would like Clò An Tìr to just be what I do, and for clients to be coming to me because they want garments with a story and responsibility. Yeah. Thank you.